being a seasoned writer for so many years, well, what were the challenges that you faced in coming up with such a what your fans would say such a masterpiece for Trece?
I guess it was the first couple of stories. The first couple of stories was me digging up all of my old stuff. And I guess the funny thing was that before Alexandra Trece came along, I was trying to write a bunch of horror stories, ghost stories, and urban fantasy type stories, but I could never find a way to end it. And I think when I figured out I need a and I read somewhere, I think it was a how to one of those how to write a movie script book. It was like, they said, who is the vehicle of the audience into the world you're creating? So in the example that book gave was Luke Skywalker. He said, in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is the audience's vehicle understanding, the entire world of Star Wars. I think now that I think about it more, I think it's actually R2 and C-3PO, right?
Yeah.
So when I realized I needed a vehicle to enter this supernatural Manila, realized it was Alejandro Trece, then everything came together. And that was mainly book one. Even the Black Darna, even our secret constellation started. He made fun of that with the movie. Dolphy made fun of that him getting the stone with Darna Kuno, but I just thought that what if there was a more heart wrenching reason for Ding to get the stone,
right?
And yes, sometimes it's when people have the best of intentions, that's when all things go down, a bad route sometimes.
Right, that's true.
And that became the premise of our secret constellation in Trece. It just became a bit harder. It became harder when we finally hit book 3, for example. It's so hard for readers to enter a comic book series now because you need to know that he's the son of this guy and they traveled back in time and had another son and now that's it's just
right.
It's just really complicated, right? So he said we should have more comics that people can read, have fun, and just in case they never get to read the next issue, it's a good experience.
Right.
And if you think about it, that's what he did with Global Frequency, and that's what he did with Planetary. But the great thing he did with that is that if you read through the entire story arc of those issues, even though they're all standalone, it builds up a mythology of that particular world. And there's a big finish. Well, that's what he did in Planetary. So I guess that's me following the gospel of Warren Ellis. When we got to book 3, I had the hardest time trying to fit the Kambal's origin in 20 pages.
Uh-huh.
So when I tried to fit it into 20 pages, it felt like the Kambal maybe they need another 20. No, they need another 20.
Right,
Oops.
right.
We're now 100 pages. And I think that was the first time we got to do... Yeah, I guess if you think about it, that was the first time we released a book with one long story arc. And I would see it more as book 1 and 2 was us doing a sprint. And then finally book 3 was us finally having enough energy and experience to do a marathon.
Right.
So I guess that, I would, and that's what I'm trying to do now with since we have taken a long break in between book 6 and 7, we're trying to do little sprints now before we can, gear up again to do a marathon. So yeah, it helps to stockpile on ideas. It helps to have a little notebook with all of your little ideas, and just so that one writer said you allow those ideas to marinate, in your brain.
Right.
Just so when you need them, they will eventually, be ready if you want to continue the whole marination metaphor.
Actually, it gave me a very good perception of what it's like, because I'm currently right now, excuse me, currently right now I'm trying to write something for a little project that I have. That we have. We're trying to come up with this little project that requires a story that's also based on Philippine mythology, and we're trying to. What I'm trying to achieve is to get bits and pieces of pop culture that's already existing, and natural mythology that has grown organically in the Philippines with a little bit of historical context into it, and putting it into this little project that we have, which hopefully will materialize sometime later this year and early next year. And I'm well into Act 1 Part 2. That's the best I could come up with right now. But I would say it's a very interesting story. I put a lot of influences from the movies that I watched before, all about Philippine mythology and encantos and all of that. But if you were to give me advice, and a lot of people are out there trying to write their own stories, and they would love to hear from you. What advice would you give us to those who would like to be just like you? Just to know how to write good stories, that would want to show their take on whatever view that they want to write about. Now, our bit is more of the supernatural and more pop culture-esque, but what would Budjette Tan be telling them if they were to write their own stories?
I have a weird feeling that if you ask Kadjo this question, his answer would be, I love his answer. He said, there are only two people that are important. Whenever we make a Trece story, there are only two people that we think about. And those two people are guys named Budjette and Kadjo. And I think that's what finally made it. That's what initially made it easy for us to work on Trece, because we did it for fun. We weren't thinking of, is this gonna go international? Is this gonna be like a is it going to be the crazy successful comic book? We did it because we wanted to have fun. And I think that's the most important thing first. That the first audience you need to satisfy is yourself. You can feel it. I mean, my my favorite story is that when I was writing the story about the Tiyanak in the mall, when I finally got to the part, when I got to the part where I was writing the Tiyanak in the mall, and I wrote that line when the Tiyanaks finally come out, I actually had to stand up and switch on the lights in the room because I got scared myself.
That was your favorite bit of that was your favorite story, the Tiyanak arc. That's the Tiyanak story.
Oh, well, it's one of my favorites. My favorite would still be the Darna story, because that for me was like, I felt like I was possessed. I sat down, and just to go off on a tangent, that was written in the Starbucks near my office, fueled by a grande brewed coffee, and I just sat there and wrote, and I just kept writing and writing and writing, and by the time the coffee was finished, it was all written. It was all done. And the funny thing is, when I was still working in Makati, I would go back to the same table, hoping the same thing would happen. But somehow that was a one-time deal.
The spirit has left the building.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Paul Medina Jr. gave a talk one time at our agency, and the same question was asked. How do you know your joke is funny? And he said, he says he doesn't know. He doesn't know if it's funny, but he said he needs to be smiling. If he sees himself, if he realizes he's smiling as he's drawing something, then he knows it's fun. And then he says he shows it to his wife, who might suddenly say, "I am corny." So sabi niya, and sometimes the trick is, if the punchline is not funny, he would then put brosha to just do an insult, and just, that's it.
Right.
So having a deadline really helped me and Kadzo finish the Trece stories when we started, and now obviously we're ignoring these deadlines. But we gave, and if you think about it, back then, 2005 was the year Comic Con started.
Yes.
So, which has become strangely enough, the seasonal deadline for most comic book creators, right? They would start suddenly rushing their work because Comic Con is coming up. But back then, there was no Comic Con. We started it in June, and we just said, okay, our deadline is July. And then we finished the first issue. So we said, okay, our deadline is August. So I think working in advertising, that's what we learned to respect. That the deadline is, finished or not finished, pass your papers.
Right.
Yeah. But the thing is, that allowed, it still meant it allowed us time for revisions. Not perfect, of course. And as you can see, Kajo has decided to redraw the entire first issue of 13 for the global edition because, again, he wasn't, given the chance. I guess that's how he would have drawn it 13, 14 years ago. But yeah, I think giving yourself a deadline for a first draft and then the second draft and the third draft. For me, the comic book is rewritten in those three stages. I write it the first time as a script. I rewrite it when I see the artwork from Kajo, and then I get to rewrite it again when we start putting the word balloons in it. At least that's my advantage as a writer. For Kajo, of course, he has to, edit himself earlier on because it's hard to redraw entire things.
Right.
And I just noticed I've rambled again. So I guess the simple thing to, if I were to sum it up, it's like have fun, do it for yourself. Don't think of, don't think, oh, will people like my story? Oh, will this become a bestseller? That's like your road to failure. The moment you start thinking of those things.
That's true.
My favorite advice about asking for feedback is from Neil Gaiman, and he said, show after you've done your story, share it with people whose opinions you trust. Yeah, but don't show it to your mom and dad who'll tell you, "Oh, that's very nice."
Oh, good job. I will love you no matter what.
So show it to people whose opinions you trust. And he said, if 9 out of 10 people say there's something wrong with your story, listen to them. If 9 out of 10 people tell you how to fix your story, ignore them.
Interesting. That's pretty.
So you should still trust. Yeah, I mean, it's still at the end your story. So because the moment people start giving you advice, oh, you should do this or this character should do that, then that's actually them bringing in how they think it should be told. And yeah, it's still your story at the end. Because you could still ignore what they said, and at the end of the day, you could be the type of author that says, well, this is how I want to tell it, and if you don't get it or if you didn't like it in the end, well, then that's fine. But yeah, no harm in always asking people for what they think and how they feel about your story.
Right. Well, I was going to say earlier that I love the fact that you put the essence of fun in the beginning, because this is exactly what we're doing right now. The reason why we're doing this is, number one, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy talking to you. You have no idea how much pleasure I am deriving out of this. This is absolutely pleasurable, and it's a great honor for me. So number one, we cover that. The second part that I want to point out is that you tell your story and that is yours. I agree. If people try to tell you that you should do it this way and not the other, well, then again, it's not their story. It's your story, and you should know exactly what it is. But if they tell you there's something wrong with it, then yeah, go ahead and take a look into that. But there are disciplines that are in place. There are disciplines that you have to utilize and that you have to incorporate. If you really want to have fun, then you got to do it right. It's not just because you're doing this for fun and then just leaving it. There's an enormous amount of discipline that's required to do the things that you love to do. And it's just not very apparent for people who do these things because they just really enjoy what they're doing. They don't realize that they're putting a lot of work. I don't know. I might be wrong, but when there's a saying that you give a man a job that he loves to do, and he'll never work a day in his life. And that's exactly what you're doing with Tresse. This is exactly what I'm doing right now. To me, this is not work. This is hell, I don't even get paid for this. And neither will you.
Yes,
But
yes, yes.